It's a real honor to be back here at the Bhakti school. And I like the new environment. It's a beautiful room. And thank you all for taking time out of your schedule to come so we can be together for a little while. Conscious control. In some ways it sounds contradictory because consciousness is something that's not possible to measure in the normal way that we measure things by the controlled experiment, for instance, one of the foundational tools of science. And in the Bhagavad Gītā, which is a text I'll be referring to tonight, which is one of the ancient wisdom texts, which is spoken directly by Krishna, who is known as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he's taken as the ultimate authority. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gītā that there are different categories of energy. And a wise person learns the difference between these energies. And somebody who is aware of the differences of the energies in the world is called a tattva darshi. Darshi means a seer, someone who sees things as they are. And tattva is the word that's often translated into the word truth. It's a demonstrative pronoun. It's exactly the same word in English, except we add an H and we say that. And if I point to something and say that, I'm assuming that it has some existence that I can identify as an object that I can be aware of. And in the Bhagavad Gītā, Krishna describes the different categories of energy that we can point to and understand the characteristics of. For instance, he gives a catalog of the energies that he calls the lower energies: earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and ahankar, which is translated as false ego. I emphasize or stop on the false ego because all of us has an ego. We don't necessarily have to have a false ego. Ego just means a sense of our personhood, that we exist as a person. And beyond these categorically lower energies, there's a superior energy. And you might be surprised to know what it is. Would you like to know?
Yes.
It's you. Because all of us here are conscious. If you notice, when you look around, you can see somebody and you feel that somebody's looking back at you. There's a conscious being there. If you look at the wall, you don't get the same experience because there's no consciousness in the wall. But there is within each one of our bodies. And as Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gītā, we are conscious beings, or persons. Person is a conscious entity. And we inhabit a body. It's not that we are the body, we inhabit a body. And the superior energy Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gītā is all of the conscious beings in this world who are inside a material body, which is an apparatus, through which we can engage with the lower energies of the world. For instance, I have eyes and I can touch the objects of my eyes, the light, and it comes back to me in different forms and shapes and gets interpreted by my brain. And I can be aware of the shapes and colors of the world. And that goes for all the different senses. However, the difference is important because when we're taking conscious control of our life, the Bhagavad Gītā describes how we must be deliberate in what we do, and to do that, we have to deliberate. Deliberation is one of the processes of that leads to spiritual enlightenment. If you think of the word deliberate, everyone say it. Please, I should say please. Don't mean to be so demanding. You might notice a word within the word deliberate, which is Libra. Have you ever heard of Libra? I'm born September 27th, so I've heard of Libra. I'm a Libra, according to the sun calendar. And what is the sign of the Libra? Any Libras in here? Hey, all right. It's a pan scale. There's two sides. You put something on one side or the other, and then you can, for instance, you put a cauliflower on one side. If you go to the green market and you put a weight on the other side, and when it balances out, you can tell how much it weighs. So deliberate. There's a way in which one should weigh out the consequences of what we do. That's one of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gītā. It sounds rather simple, but how do we do that? Well, one of the ways we start is by understanding the different categories of energy. So let me give you an example of how this applies, or can apply in our lives. We're taking conscious control of our life. In the Bhagavad Gītā, Krishna mentions that whatever we contemplate in this world, wherever we place our consciousness or our awareness, we begin to connect with that object. He says in the Gita, Dhyayato Vishayam Punsam Sangasteshu Vijayate Sangat Sanjayate Kama Kama Krodho Vilavite. What this sentence I just pronounced in Sanskrit is describing is a series of events that unfold when we use our consciousness to look at the world. And as an example, from my vantage point, I can see there are many cars outside. Some of them are moving and some of them are parked. Did anybody park outside today? Okay, Olga parked outside. So let's just say, for the sake of this thought experiment, Olga, if you don't mind, that your car is parked right down here, pretty close. And let's just say we're sitting here and all of a sudden we hear a crashing sound. And Olga, although she can't see out the window, she can triangulate by hearing, and she thinks, well, that sounds about right where my car was. And how does Olga feel now? Her car just got hit. How does she feel? Okay, terrified, that's a general term. Give some specific symptoms. Okay, worried. Is there anything physical? Heart palpitation. The heart might start beating more rapidly, right? Maybe perspiration. And then the mind might start racing. She might think, oh, I forgot to renew my insurance. Where am I going to get the money? Or whatever. All these things will take place within the mind. And then, let's say, Olga, you go to the window and you look out. Did anybody else park out there? Yes, okay. So let's say Olga goes to the window and she looks out and it wasn't her car, it was Gopal Champa's car. Now, how does Olga feel? Heart rate goes back down again. She feels relieved. And how does Gopal Champa feel? And how do I feel? Because he's supposed to drive us to the airport one day. The point is that there are many cars in New York City, and I guarantee you some of them are getting hit right now. But we're not worried about it because they're not our cars. It's not my car. There's the difference between a car and my car. And so Krishna describes this phenomenon in the Bhagavad Gītā, that when I look out into the world and I see something, he says, Jayato, the implication is, I look at it with an idea that I want that. That's mine. I'm going to keep it. I'm going to control it. And if we went through the trouble of getting something in our life and we call it mine, then we have to deal with it. And it leads to a series of consequences. Sequence. There's a sequence that unfolds in our life when we look at something and we contemplate it. And so what Krishna describes is that whatever we look at as ours, whatever we claim as ours, and as a disclaimer, I'm not advocating that we shouldn't have anything. That's a different idea, and I'll build on this. It becomes part of us, or an anga. Jayato vishayam sangas teshu jayate. Sangha means we have a connection to something. Just like you have an arm's part of the body, and it's fairly meaningful, right? Your arm? So yes, you want to keep it right. Yeah. So it's an anga. And when I look out into the world and I see, okay, I'm an American, America means something to me, so that becomes an anga. What else can I look at that becomes a part of me? It's mine. My car, we definitely got that one. What else? Thumb. Phone. Phone. Yeah, you got your phone. What else is there in life? I mean, a car, a phone. Passport. That could be one. It's my passport. Family. Nation. Backpack. All of these, my coat. These ideas. And then, of course, then we get why? My money. Yeah, my money. So then we have my body. My hair. Of course, I can't say that much. My hair, my physique, my face, everything mine. And because of that, I have a relationship with it. Now, what Krishna is pointing out in the Bhagavad Gītā is, you're the observer of all these things. You're not the things themselves, but when you look at them in a certain light, that is, that these are mine, then it becomes part of you. It becomes an anga of you. Now, there's a different way to look at the world, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gītā. Brahman yadaya karmani sangam chakva karotya lipitena sapatena padma patram ivamvata. Here, Krishna gives an analogy, a metaphor of the lotus. A lotus is called Padmaja. Padma means mud, and Ja means to be born. A lotus is born in mud, and it grows up in the water, has its roots at the bottom of the pond, and then its leaves and the flower stay at the top of the pond. However, amazingly, it's impervious to water. Also, it's not muddy. It's clear and beautiful. When water splashes on the lotus, flower or leaf, it rolls right on. So Krishna gives the example that when we look at the world in a different light, that is, through the eyes of service, and there's three general categories of worldview that are given in the ancient wisdom literatures like Bhagavad Gītā, ways you can look at the world and consider all the things in the world. One is that I will enjoy the world as much as possible. In the 1980s, there used to be a bumper sticker. I think it's long forgotten. It said, whoever has the most toys wins. And there is an idea that if you're able to accumulate and to adjust your life in such a way that you have more material resources than other people, then you've been successful. This is the path of material enjoyment. Then there's a reaction to that life, because there's a pendulum swing between enjoying the world and then wanting to give it up. When we try to enjoy the world, because we're not fully compatible with the things of this world, when we try to enjoy them, then there comes a time when we become frustrated with them and we want to give them up. And this is a phenomenon called bhoga, tyaga. Bhoga means I try to enjoy, and then tyaga is the swing of the pendulum back saying, I give the whole thing up. It's too frustrating. I can't handle it. But there's a third path that's advocated by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gītā, which is a way to see the world so that you live like a lotus. You do what?
Live like a lotus.
Yeah, there's a live like a lotus movement. It's sweeping across the nation. Just got here to New York today. And he says, Sangam Tyakta Karotiha, which means that when you look at anything in the world and you think, how can I use this for its highest purpose? And the highest purpose that's advocated for in these ancient wisdom literatures is service to the Supreme. In fact, there was a convention that took place 5,000 years ago in a forest called Naimisaranya. The word Naimisaranya, the name of the forest, means a place where nobody blinks, because they're so interested in the subject matter that they come there fully alert and they don't blink. Don't become self-conscious now that you don't really. And there, thousands of high-minded people came together to discuss how one could do the highest good for oneself and for all living beings in the world. It's a nice conference, isn't it? A good subject matter. Yeah. And after discussion, they met a great teacher named Suta Goswami, and they asked him to be the leader of their convention. And he gave them some aphorisms to work with. And one of them goes like this. It's the conclusion of their seminar on how to do good for oneself and others. It says this. He said this in Sanskrit. Savai pumsam parodharmo yato bhaktira saje ahayatukiya kutiyata yatmasvikasiyati. Well known here in New York, apparently. Savai pumsam means for all people, for all living beings. The way that one can be completely in harmony with oneself and with the world is to be engaged in service to the Supreme. And that service should be unmotivated. It means I'm not doing it because I want to get paid. I'm not doing it with the mercantile idea that I'll do this much, but I want something back. You may have had an experience in your life where someone's given you something out of love, and they didn't expect anything in return. Perhaps you received it unexpectedly, or maybe it was done by someone who didn't even have means, and they gave you something simple, like maybe they made a little animal out of a piece of paper, or they gave you a flower, maybe you picked from your own garden. Sometimes a child will pick a flower from the garden and give it to her mother to say, Mother, I got this flower for you. Mother knows full well she grew that flower. She doesn't mind that her little daughter picked it because she's accepting the love with which she's giving it. In such a circumstance, one might feel, how could I ever reciprocate this? There's an opening of the heart. And the sages opine and wrote this verse together, that when you look at the world in a different light, that everything can be used in loving service to the Supreme. And whatever I cast my eyes upon, I look at it with the idea or the contemplation of how may I use this for its highest purpose, to engage in service to the Supreme. When one flips a switch, and it's not all that hard, especially when we understand the categories of energy of the world and how the world works, that if I switch my intention, the way I interact with the world, from one of enjoyment to one of service, or from one of renunciation and giving up the world, to one of I'm using everything in it for service, for a higher cause, then wherever I go in the world, first of all, you'll be welcome wherever you go, for the most part, because such a mentality of service, or a servant's mentality, is welcome everywhere. People feel it intuitively when one has come to this high-minded ideal that everything's to be used for the highest purpose. And one's not coveting, trying to take from others. We also find that we don't have the phenomena of the sangha with the material world the same way we do when we want to control and enjoy. So this is one of the first principles of the Bhagavad Gītā, which is to understand the categories of energy and not make categorical mistakes. For instance, we're part of this supreme consciousness, and we're same in quality as our original source, called Krishna. In the same way that particles, photons of sun are part of the sun, but they're not the whole sun. Same in quality, different in quantity. They're not the complete whole, they're part of the whole. My teacher gave an example of this switch in consciousness. And he told a story about a tiny screw. And how a screw, however tiny it may be, has a purpose. It fits somewhere. A screw in a machine that is doing some specialty work, very important. If it's not there, the machine may not be able to do its work. I have practical experience of that because when I was in 4th grade, we used to love it on the days when our teacher would bring the movie projector into the room, because we figured that was a special treat. We didn't have to hear her talk. We just watch a movie. And when she rolled it in and then stepped out of the room for a moment, Denny Scardacci, who was a real rascal, reached over it and he unscrewed a part of he took a screw out of the machine, just as an act of rascaldom. All the kids thought it was really funny until the teacher tried to turn on the projector and the picture was shaky. The machine couldn't hold the picture. The projector was shaking back and forth because the screw was gone. By that time, Denny Scardacci was afraid to produce the screw because the teacher was completely frustrated that it didn't work. A screw, when you find it on skimmer horn underneath your shoe, you may pick it up and think, how much could I get for this on eBay? You might not think that because you might already know that you're not going to get anything for it. But if that screw was reunited with the machine that it fell out of, it would be extremely valuable. And one day when I was walking on a little dirt path near our home, I stopped for a minute to look at the view and I felt something underfoot. I reached down and I picked up a little screw that was buried in the dust. And I remembered this example. I brushed the screw off and I was looking at it. And I started feeling a little sorry for it. And then I felt kindred with the screw and I was thinking, you and I are in the same situation. You're lost, so am I. How do I reconnect? And that's the idea of yoga. Yoga means to reconnect with our highest purpose. And savai pumsam, paro dharma. You've heard the word dharma, that which holds us together. That connection is what everyone's looking for in this world. And it comes by consciously, very deliberately, reconnecting with our original source, Krishna, in service. And when we do that even a little bit, we'll feel the result that we feel whole, because as parts of the whole, when we connect again to the whole, and we feel our purpose, then we're invigorated. So Krishna gives this idea in the Bhagavad Gītā, which is simple and can be enacted at any time. We can change our intention for how we do things from trying to control or trying to possess to service, how to use whatever I have in service. And that includes this body. Another example that my teacher used to give is that my hand is meant to serve the body. And if I say, come here, hand, I'll try it now. Come here, hand. It's not sure where I want it to go, but it came anyway. You saw that, right? If I say, come here, hand, and the hand doesn't come, that's a serious problem. I'm going to have to go to see a neurologist or someone who can figure out why my hand is not responding anymore. It's considered to be out of order. The hand is a very valuable instrument, but if it doesn't serve, or if it's severed from the body, sorry, no, it's a family show. If you find a hand somewhere along Skimmerhorn, you might think, who does this belong to? Where does it fit? By itself, separated from the body, it's just a scary sight. But when it's on the body and it's active and serving, it's very valuable. The analogy extends that we're very important when we are engaged in service. I'll give you a practical example of how, when you're in a service mentality, you can become an insider in any situation. Let's say you go to a social event and you don't know anybody there. Well, you know one person, the person who invited you, but she's not there. And when you get there, all the way there, you're thinking, I wonder if I'm overdressed or underdressed. And when you get there, you're not sure whom to speak to because you don't know anybody and things are obviously unfolding. Let's say it's a wedding. And there are people setting things up and you're standing there wondering who you can talk to. Have you ever been in an awkward social situation, anybody?
Yeah.
Okay, 2 or 3 people. Because it's practically every day, all the time. So let's say you walk in and you see all this going on. There's a bit of clamor. You're not sure where to stand, who to talk to. Maybe go back to talk to the doorman who opened the door for you and hang out. But you see people moving some chairs. So obviously something that's needed. So you go over and you tell the person who looks like they're working on it, so, can I help? And they say, yeah, sure, we just need to move those 30, 40 more chairs over here. Then you start grabbing chairs. How do you feel now? not awkward. Suddenly feel like, oh, I got a purpose here. And now other people come in and they feel awkward and they look at you and go like, oh, he's an insider. You switch from being an outsider and feeling awkward to being an insider suddenly because you got some service. So in the Bhagavad Gītā, Krishna describes how we have a dharma, which means that which holds us in harmony with the world. And that is service. And when we direct that service to our source, Krishna, then it becomes perfectly aligned. And then we feel naturally engaged. We become an insider in the universe. We no longer feel awkward in the universe. Wherever we go, we feel that we have a high purpose. The highest of purposes to engage in service to the Supreme. And there are ways in which the Bhagavad Gītā describes how to align oneself in that service. And that's what spiritual groups are meant for, is to find one's place in service. What this group is meant for, this Bhakti school, is to identify a way that you can catch on to a service that you can engage in. And then it's the screw going back in the machine, the hand reconnected to the body. And when you're able to pursue that and continue it, then one lives according to one's dharma, and then one feels satisfied. So this takes some deliberation. If we make a categorical mistake and think that this temporary world is mine to enjoy, and I try to arrange the world in such a way that I'll be satisfied, will always be out of balance. In the Bhagavad Gītā, Krishna says, Yehi samsparchaja bhoga dukkha yonaya ivate adyantaranta kanteya nate shuddhamate. An intelligent person doesn't try to manipulate the world in such a way as to enjoy it, because he or she knows that everything here has a shelf life, a beginning and an end. There's one thing in this world that doesn't have a shelf life. You know what a shelf life is? Like, Pop-Tarts. How long do they last on the shelf? Touche. Okay. There's also a terminology in physics, a half-life. Some chemicals, they have a half-life. That's much longer than a shelf life. But whether it's a shelf life or a half-life, some material elements last for thousands of years before they start to degrade and transfer into another state. And a lot of food that's on the shelves, they have a short shelf life. How long is the shelf life for cottage cheese? For 50 points. Huh? 2 weeks? Huh? 30 days? Could be 30 days, but after that, it's gonna get a little strange. So it has shelf life. What doesn't have a shelf life in this world? Same answer as before. You don't have a shelf life. This is deliberation. The word is, or to be. Are you familiar with that? There you go. Yeah. It's not a trick. Look up the etymology of that which exists, is, or to be, or whatever way you conjugate it. It traces back, the meaning is that which remains. So many things here in the world have a shelf life. They won't remain. They'll change their state. There's one thing that always keeps its state, and that's us. And when we're able to be aware of our steady state, And we're able to see that only the body is changing and the world is changing around us. We come to the most amazing opportunity. And that is described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is a kind of a postgraduate study of the Bhagavad Gītā, in which is described something that's related to every one of us here, because it's talking about Nri Deha. Everyone say Nri. Deha. Nri Deha means the human form. Anybody who's a human, raise your hand. Anybody who is an AI robot, raise your hand. Okay, we're all humans. So the teaching in the Srimad Bhagavatam says, Nri Deham Adyam Sulabham Sudulabham. Lavam Sukalpam Guru Karnavam. And that means that the human body, the Nri Deha, is like a boat. And it's specially designed to cross over the temporary world and go into the spiritual realm. And for that, one needs some direction from a captain, and one needs some breezes that will ply the ship across the water. And those come in the form of the teachings of the Bhagavad Gītā. And a similar verse says, Bhavam sudurlabhavidam bahusamgavanti manusham artadam anityam apihadira. Now here's the greatest deal that you'll ever hear about. This verse says it's very rare to get a human form. You can't put in for it. You either get it or you don't. You didn't put in for it, did you? Do you remember? I know I was born in Kaiser Hospital in Walnut Creek, California. He just came out and said, okay, what do I do now? And this human form is said to be extremely special because you can deliberate and you can then decide what's temporary, what's permanent, what's matter, what's lower energy, what's higher energy consciousness. And you can act accordingly. You can adjust your course. So, labvam sudurlabhamidam bahusambhavanti. Then here comes the next part, which is the offer that you get. Manusham arthanam anityam apihadira, which means that although this vessel, this human vessel we have, like a boat, it's temporary. It has a shelf life. How long does this product last? 8 years. According to actuary charts, women live longer. They get about, if you don't smoke and a bunch of other stuff. It can go up to about 87. For men, it's about 84. I know I'm working on an app. I'll tell you about it later. But it has shelf life. 100 years, you said, that's getting to the upper limit. It's definitely going to diminish. So it's called anityam. Say nityam. Nityam means something that lasts forever. No shelf life. That's you. And anityam means the shelf life. It's going to expire. The warranty will run out too. And you can't trade it in. You can get a few new parts, but so anityam apihadira. It says that you should be wise. Dhira means you should be wise to understand that this body has shelf life. It's going to come and go. But while you're in it, if you act rightly, if you figure out how to use the body for its ultimate purpose, for its dharma, the purpose for which it was created as a boat to take you across the temporary and take you into the eternal, then you're the smartest person who ever lived. Because if you have something that's going to, like, let's just say you have some ice cubes and you're able to sell them down here on Schermerhorn for a huge profit. They're going to melt anyway, right? So this body is going to melt away. But if you're able to parlay this body in the temporary life that you have, and 100 years like a flash, it just goes by so quickly it's hard to calculate. If you're able to use it for a higher purpose and elevate yourself, then this is the best deal that anyone's ever heard in the universe. And that's that's available in the human form of life. So these high-minded literatures, like the Bhagavad Gītā, Srimad Bhagavatam, are teaching how to consciously control your life by becoming wise, understanding the categories of energy, and not throwing away your most valuable asset. And what is your most valuable asset? I would argue that it's your attention. Because where attention goes, energy flows. Wherever we put our attention, that's the direction we're going to go in. And yes, time is also a rare commodity because you can't get it back. And our attention also is taking us in a certain direction. So when we take conscious control of our consciousness, of our awareness, and we apply it to the eternal, and very practically we adopt the mode of service, then we start moving in the direction that is described in the Bhagavad Gītā as coming to the highest goal of life. And Bhagavad Gītā, by the way, isn't preachy. Doesn't sound like it's condemning anyone. It's just describing, Krishna's describing how the universe works. And in one place he says, Yanti Deva Vrta Devan, Pitrin Yanti Pratirvata, Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja, Yanti Mam Yajido. You want to know what it means? Yeah. It means you're free to move about the universe or beyond. You can go any direction you want. It's up to you. You have responsibility as a human to direct your attention in the way in which you'll get the best return on your attention. And you can do that by deliberation and by hearing from and taking guidance from books like the Bhagavad Gītā, which advise us where to point our attention, how to reform our intention, so that we don't become entangled in petty things, but we move constantly towards the ultimate goal of life. And that's my preamble, the preface to what I was going to say tonight. But before I go any further, I'll take a few reflections or questions. The reflections are easier than questions, in my opinion, because reflection just means anything you heard that piqued your interest in my monologue. You can just say it back to me. Or if you have a question that you think will be relevant and open up the conversation, then ask that. Yes.
Thank you so much.
Do we have an extra mic? I'll repeat what you say so everyone in the back can hear.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for the wonderful lecture. My question is, can you elaborate on how you talked about how devotional service is like very important? Can you elaborate on how physical seva, like maybe cooking or cleaning pots or like sweeping the floor, can help establish a relationship with Krishna? Because it's much easier for me to understand how reading Srimad Bhagavatam or performing Harinam, because you're directly connected with Krishna's name, form, and pastime. It's much easier to develop a relationship with Krishna through one of those processes versus a manual seva. And oftentimes, like devotees say that it cleanses your heart and you develop more humility. But could you elaborate on how that helps establish a relationship with Krishna?
When's the last time you swept the floor of somewhere?
Recently.
Well, how did it feel?
I mean, I didn't want to do it, but I did it.
Did anybody else here like to sweep like I did? When I first joined an ashram, the first services I was invited to participate in was washing pots. And once I started washing pots, I felt enveloped by the spiritual energy because I had my own spot right there at the sink. I felt like I was an insider. And I didn't really distinguish between one service and another. I just thought, I've been given this service, and I'm going to lean into it. And the more I leaned into it, the more I did feel peaceful and look forward to it, especially because the environment of the ashram was specifically for those who want to cultivate this mood of self-service. So it's not the activity as much as it is the attitude with which we approach it. We can engage in philosophical discussions as a service. We can cultivate philosophy by reading and memorizing verses and so forth. But we could also do that in a fruitive way as well. You think, I'm going to know more than everybody else. And then you may feel not as satisfied. But if you sweep with the idea that I'm doing this for Krishna, then you feel satisfied. And the evidence from history, one of the great examples of sweeping in order to be connected to God is given there in the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. For those who don't know what that is, it's a history of Krishna's avatar as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And there's an incident in the city called Jagannath Puri, it's a holy city, where there's a remarkable temple and they have a festival every year to celebrate the path of Bhakti. And there was a king there named Prataparudra. And although he was engaged in politics, as kings usually are, and he was a very wealthy person, he had a sincere desire within his heart to please God. And at that time, it was unheard of in that culture for a king to come and sweep the road. At that time in history, there was a hierarchy, and the king was not to touch a broom. He very deliberately came, and before the festival called Rath Yasha, which we just celebrated down Fifth Avenue on Saturday, the king came and he took the broom and he swept in front of the cart. Much of it was symbolic. The cart could have rolled in that direction without him, but he wanted to show it sincerely that he wanted to serve manually, even though he was a king who never would have picked up a broom. And because of that, it's described how he reached the pinnacle of spirituality through sweeping. So it's not so much what the activity is, but it's the way we approach it. We approach any activity sincerely with the idea of wanting to do this to please the Supreme, which is the admonition or the directive that we get, and I'll repeat it, from that seminar that took place 5,000 years ago at Naimisaranya, where they said, Savai Kumcham Paro Dharmo Yato Pakira Huksaje Ahaitu Kia Pratiyata Yaya Mastu Prasidati, which means that anything that you do in this world that you offer sincerely to the Supreme, Krishna, will satisfy your heart. So it's not the activity, but it's the mentality with which you do it. What a great question. Makes me want to go sweep something. Yeah? Yes, bye. Hare Krishna.
You mentioned that are there things that are more in line with and
are there services that are more in line with our nature than others? And if so, how could you find them?
And
how fiercely should we protect them? You're getting 3 in 1. That's pretty good. Well, let's go the first 2 also, because they're very important questions you're asking. all services are important. It's not the service per se, but it's the sincerity with which we do the service. And there's a story from the Ramayana, the story of Sita, Ram, Lakshman, Hanuman. This story is famous around the world. If you go to Thailand, you'll find that all the bridges there are named after Rama. The bridges are called Rama 1, Rama 2, Rama 3, Rama 4. And of course, in India, when the story of the Ramayana, at least in the old days, I remember it, if the Ramayana was playing on television, then the whole country would shut down because everyone would stay home to watch it. It's still beloved. In Indonesia, they still do reenactments of the Ramayana and so forth. Famous story. And there's a part of the Ramayana story where Ramchandra and his minions, who happen to be animal-like creatures, of course, George Lucas copied the theme of Ramayana, literally. And they were building a bridge to recover Ram's kidnapped wife, Sita. And to do that, they were throwing boulders into the ocean to create a bridge to Lanka, modern-day Ceylon. And one of the great heroes of the story, Hanuman, who's this monkey with unlimited strength, throwing huge boulders into the water. And as he's doing it, he sees a tiny chipmunk throwing tiny pebbles. And because the chipmunk and his friends are hard to spot, and Hanuman said, why don't you guys move? Because I'm doing some real service here. You guys are in the way. And when Ram, for whom everyone's doing the service, heard that, he said, no, what you're doing is equal. Because you're doing, Hanuman, according to your capacity. And the squirrel can only throw pebbles. And that's according to squirrel's capacity. No, it's not a squirrel, it's a chipmunk. And therefore, they're equal because it's according to what you can do. There's an old saying, birds fly in the sky as high as they're able. The sky's unlimited. So whatever you can do, whatever level a bird can fly at, as long as it's at that capacity. So the services are according to one's taste and capacity. And everyone has a different taste and capacity. So whatever service that you can do is valuable, especially when it's offered with love. And for instance, if you offer something simple, in the Bhagavad Gītā, Krishna says, if you offer me with love and devotion a leaf, a flower, fruit, or water, I'll accept it. It's not the leaf or the fruit or the flower that counts, because you can get those anywhere. But it's the love behind it when you offer it that makes the difference. And where do you get service? You generally get service from somebody who already has it. There's a system called parampara, which means one after another. Someone gets service from someone who already has it. And if you can find somebody that has a significant service, and then you can ask to help and say, can I help you with this? That is an inroad into getting service yourself, because service always expands when you do it sincerely. You may start with sweeping the floor and you may end up as the purveyor of an entire project that you're developing, starting with one little broom sweep or one sweep of the floor. You get service from others who have it. And how fierce should you be? Well, in whatever service you do, if you put your heart into it, and of course there's different ways of describing fierce, shouldn't be scary to other people. But if you covet service and you take it as personal responsibility, which is a very high level of service, because things don't always go the way we hope they will. There's a lot of twists and turns, but if you're determined and you take the service and you see it through, even though there's ups and downs, this is considered first-class service. Take responsibility for it. So you should be fierce about that, about seeing it through, protecting it, and considering whatever service you get to be extremely important, whatever it may be, because it's all important. Oh, there's a few more questions. Olga, right? Take that. Reflections are fine. And by the way, that little box doesn't amplify except online where it's being live streamed. So whatever you say, if you say it louder, everyone can hear it, and they'll automatically hear it online.
The reflection is the story about the animal doing the service they can and get what they need. It doesn't sound like a company. That's my reflection. Can you talk about that?
Well, when we say, there are particular words that may evoke certain emotions according to context. And there's a way that in spiritual dealings, service is absolute. Whereas when we're dealing with economics and political systems, may not apply in the same way. So we may be comparing apples and oranges when we talk about a political system as compared, in which people's impetus to work or to be entrepreneurial maybe feels stifled when you say it's all the same. But on the platform of service, different category, because we're talking about categories also. When it's service to God, it's what we call transcendental to mundane consideration. People do need impetus, and when we're doing service, and you invite people to do whatever they can according to their capacity, I've found in developing groups and teams and communities that when you give an opportunity to everybody to do what they can, there's far more participation. It's far more fruitful. For instance, in our community in Silicon Valley years ago when we started, one of the activities of our community is to distribute books. And I found that in a more hierarchical system, in other systems that were more hierarchical, in that some people did way better than others, and that if we celebrated people all at the top, I found that a lot of other people didn't want to participate. In fact, I didn't want to participate because I found one day after distributing books in Los Angeles, I came home and there was a clipboard, and you could write how much you did for the day on the clipboard. And I saw that I was going to be number 3, so I thought, maybe I just won't put my name down. And I thought, well, if I feel like that, how do a lot of other people do who did fewer books than I did? So then I rethought how the process was organized. And in Silicon Valley, when we started, we didn't talk about individual scores at all. That may seem communistic, but the fact is that using that system, actually somebody called us on it early on. They called up and said, hey, that sounds communistic. They didn't actually say that. They said something else that to challenge us, because they said it's supposed to be more competitive. So the person who answered the phone said, okay, compete with us then. We'll do this system and you do your system. And I can say definitively, and we have the receipts to show it, that we're doing way better than the person who called us. Like by 10 times. And so the phrase that you brought up, it sends shivers through the spines of every American, apparently. And is used quite frequently to scare people. But in the spiritual consideration, all for one and one for all is very liberating. And at the same time, the competition is still there. It's never erased because we're individuals, and individuals always look around and see how others are doing. There's a difference, however. In spiritual competition, when you see somebody doing better than yourself, you don't become envious. You think, good for them. I would like to increase the way I'm doing it so I can do more service. You get inspired by it. Whereas with the material mindset, the same concept can create, as we know, a Cold War that goes on for decades. Is that right? Okay, there were a couple more hands. Yeah.
I have a question about the spiritual aspect of this. How do you distinguish what our capacity is as how do you feel that those were
Such a good question. Thank you very much. Very important. In the Bhagavad Gītā, Krishna talks about how we should live a balanced life. Yukta hara viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmasu, yukta swapnavabodhasya yogo bhavati dukkha. In fact, he says, if you learn how to be balanced, and he gives 3 examples. He said, don't eat too much, don't eat too little. That's it. Don't sleep too much, and don't sleep too little. And don't recreate too much, and don't recreate too little. Be yukta, or balanced in the middle. And general rule is that if you're gaining strength from your service, then you have it in a good balance. If you become overwrought and your body becomes unhealthy because you're not taking care of yourself, and you're not able to complete the service because you have other obligations, or you're able to complete your service but you're not able to complete your other obligations, then you may have to balance it a little bit more. And it's really important because oftentimes people don't ask you how much service you're already doing. They just notice that you have capacity, so they say, could you do a little bit more? So you have to be a little self-directing. I had a personal experience with the founder of the movement, Prabhupada, whom I met circa 1974 in San Francisco, when I was part of a little group that was going out to distribute books. When I say distribute books, maybe it's euphemistic. We were actually selling books. And then the leader of our community came and introduced us to Prabhupada, name of the founder, and whose books they were, and told them how many we were doing. And his reply to us was, you must also read the books. They're not just for selling. They're not written them for you just to sell, but to read also and become spiritually conscious. And I took that to heart because there was an era around in the 1970s and beyond when there were large pushes for doing more and more service. And I saw some colleagues definitely get burned out. I always kept that statement that I'm entitled to take the time I need to read also, and to do other things to make sure that I'm whole. That includes physical health as well. Prabhupada used to walk every day vigorously because it was recommended by a doctor. And he would make sure that he ate a balanced diet. And those are important aspects. If you want to put together one full lifetime, like it sounds like you do, then you have to attend to all the different parts of your life. Think about the Greeks and how they talked about being a Renaissance type person, where you attend to all the different aspects of your life, physically, mentally, spiritually, and all of it adds up to a holistic approach to a spiritual practice throughout your life. So you have to attend to that. I mean, you have to take responsibility for it because not everybody will definitely direct you like that. Does that help? Okay. Yes. I'm checking the time because I'm notorious for not knowing what time it is during a talk like this. What do we have? It's past time, right? And 5 minutes? Okay, 5 minutes. I'll give short answers. My wife's laughing at me. Go ahead.
Well, I think most of the angles of the service was covered, and there's another angle. If I think I can pick up a bigger boulder, and seems like I have a muscle for it. Others say I have a muscle for it, but I'm scared. And I know it sounds ridiculous that I'm scared of failure because in spirituality there's no failure. It's more my false ego, but that's the reality.
What she was talking about is being afraid to take more service because of maybe failing in it. Right?
More like a different service in my nature, but seems like more important to care for the fear of it.
Taking a different service than your nature and then you might fail in it.
No, in my nature.
Can you ask the question in one sentence? Just say one sentence with a question mark at the end.
How to overcome fear of failure?
How to overcome fear of failure? Thank you. That's a nice question. That's one I can hit, hopefully. Failure is not necessarily detrimental, and I know this is self-help 101, so don't freak out and say this is cliche. It kind of is, but it is. The fact is that first, an example Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives, he's one of the great teachers of Bhakti, he said when you're ascending in Bhakti, it's like climbing a ladder. You put your foot on one rung, when it feels secure, then you can move to the next one. He said if you try to run too fast up the ladder, you could slip and fall. And if you get timid in climbing the ladder, then you're not going to climb it. So you have to find where you're comfortable, take up as much service as you can, feel that you're secure in it, and then try to increase a little bit. As far as failure goes, I've found, and all the team members that I've worked with, we have found together, that failure is not necessarily detrimental. It becomes the pillar of success. And to that end, we've developed a few mantras. One of them is that workarounds bring turnarounds. Oftentimes we run into situations that seem intractable. But if you declare that it has to be my way, I have to do it the way I thought I'm going to do it, or I should do it, and you make an ultimatum, then you're stuck. Can't go any further. But if you stay fluid and you think, how can I work around this? And you keep looking for workarounds, you often find a better way to do it. It was hiding. It's hiding in my own assumption that I can only do it one way. And oftentimes when we fail, if we have enough courage to face the failure and see it as an opportunity to look for how to improve the next time, then we get stronger. In fact, Prabhupada writes about it in one of his books called The Light of the Bhagavad, where he says failure may not be detrimental, may become the pillars of success. And it's those times when you make a mistake that you bolster your determination to do better the next time. For instance, I remember I was asked to sing one of the songs that we sing during the morning program a long time ago. And I stepped up and I started singing and I forgot the word. And I became really determined after that to learn the words. Where'd that determination come from? It was sparked by that failure. I thought, never again. And that's how people get strong. And it's inevitable. If you interview anybody who's successful or has grown in anything, they've been willing to accept failure and look for either how to work around or how to improve the next time if they look better. I've used up my 5 minutes. I thank you all. Okay, this is the 30-second one and the last one. Please go ahead. Does it take time for a liberated soul to come to a point of understanding that he or she is liberated? Or they always realize it? There are different levels of liberated soul. Some are cognizant of it, and some go through a seeming series of regular life situations, and then by the result of their work, people can understand that they're liberated, and then they can also. What's more, the idea of liberation, as Krishna describes it in the Bhagavad Gītā, it applies to anyone who's sincerely engaged in the process, because as some of the great teachers have described, there's a ripe mango and there's an unripe mango. They're both mangoes, and one will ripen soon. The other one's already ripe, but different stages. So as far as cognizance goes, it's not stereotyped. There are different situations, and for different reasons, people are aware that they're liberated, but a liberated soul in general doesn't consider him or herself to be liberated oftentimes. So it's a bit of a conundrum, because there's a kind of humility called dainya that comes along with spiritual advancement, where one counterintuitively, or paradoxically, I should say, thinks that one is less qualified than one is. But by the symptoms, one can see how somebody's a liberated soul. And especially, there's 2 symptoms mentioned in the vast number of Vedic literatures that are always applicable. One is steadiness, and the other is the quality of the person's speech, which is detectable. You know, there's an old saying, fool is not discovered until he or she speaks. Or he had nothing to say, and then he said it. And a liberated person who's full of light speaks in such a way that others get benefit. That's their intention, and that's what comes out from their heart. It's a very interesting question, and I thank you for asking it. But obviously, there are different levels of answering it, not just one way. Now we have an opportunity for the next couple of minutes to engage in this group meditation, if you'd like to participate. And it's called Sankirtan. So do we have time for this? We'll practice the system given recently, within the last several hundred years, of chanting, singing mantra, and then repeating, sort of like a chorus, call and repeat. So I volunteer to sing. And then if you no, don't clap yet. Maybe you hear me sing. And then you can repeat as a chorus. And the idea is that these are transcendental or spiritual sounds. So you can just let it all go in and experience the vibration of it. And the teaching is that it's highly purifying. Shall we try? Okay. Krishna. I start on C sharp. And then up. No. Here, you want me to show you? Sorry. He's got perfect pitch, so all I have to do is just show him what I want to do. And then okay. So we'll sing the Hare Krishna mantra. Goes Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama